All right, we are live. We are back. It's the Modern Day Alchemists, episode 14. And I am here with my fabulous friends, D. Grant Smith and Kristen Brown. If you haven't met them before, you are in for a treat. These are two beautiful people with amazing insights into life and today, leadership. As you can see in the title of our talk today, we're going to talk about leadership because leadership happens, baby. It does. And so, just early on, if you're tuning in, you're like, well, I'm not a leader. I would stop you right there because everybody is a leader. You might not have a team, you might not have a title, you might not have a corner office, but leadership is a part of life because at the very least, you got to lead yourself every single day. So, we're going to talk about the essence of leadership from three different perspectives, which is the power of the modern day alchemists. But before we jump deeply into this subject, I would like each of you to take a moment to introduce yourselves to those who have never met you before. And as always, ladies first, Kristen.
As I'm writing notes. Okay. My name is Kristen Brown, and the gist of it is I help people reset their limiting beliefs, the subconscious mind, the programming that is running the show of their life, so that they can come from a clearer perspective about who they are, which will organically change their energy, which then will call better life experiences to you.
Woo! I like that. Come up with a better description every week. And you can reach Kristen Brown at the URL that's right there on the screen, kristenbrown.org, which will lead you to all things Kristen Brown, including her book. Do you have your book right there, Kristen, that you can hold up?
I do.
All right. So Kristen is an international #1 best-selling author on Amazon with her new book, Recovering People Pleaser. And I cannot read the subtitle from here.
A spiritual guide to reclaim your true worth and attract the love you deserve.
Say that a little slower. I like that.
A spiritual guide to reclaim your true worth and attract the love you deserve.
All right.
Deserve.
I love it. All right. Over to you, D. Grant. Please introduce yourself and let the people know what you're up to these days.
Oh, my name is D. Grant, and I paint word pictures and teaching pictures with the power of imagination to help you transform the story that you are living, the way that you see yourself, the way that you understand life, and the way that you understand God. And in particular, to grow love from within the garden of your mind and your heart, because whatever it is that you are planting inside yourself and cultivating inside yourself and allowing to come into that inner garden is going to find its way into your life experience. So why not make it love?
Fabulous. Love that. I love that. I am Joseph MoJOE McCarthy. I am coach, mentor, guide. I like to say Sherpa. People don't really use the word Sherpa much, but the reason I like the word Sherpa is because a Sherpa helps somebody else reach their potential, reach their goal, get to the top of the mountain, and can point out the pitfalls and the landmines and tell them what equipment they need along the way. So consider me coach, mentor, Sherpa for personal growth, for development, for spirituality, and leadership as well. You can reach me at mojo.studio, as it says right there below my name. So there, we got the formalities out of the way. Thank you for anybody and everybody who tunes in now or after the fact. We are not just here to talk to each other, although that is very rewarding. We're also here to share our wit and wisdom with anybody and everybody who might turn in. And just for those who might wonder, we're not about numbers, because numbers are false analytics anyway. We're just really about impacting each other's lives and anybody else, because we know it has an exponential factor in play. When you impact me, and I impact somebody else, it's all part of the big picture. So we're big picture people. We're going to share some big pictures and some little pictures and talk today about leadership, probably from several different angles. I'm assuming, for those who have tuned in, we don't script this thing. We don't have bullet points. We're just all giving our own perspective. So to sort of ease into this whole idea, I chose the title carefully. Leadership happens, because it's a play on words, of course. But what I want to point out to those who are tuning in and get your feedback, D. Grant and Kristen, is that the word relationship and leadership both have ship in them, right? They share the ship. And for me, ship it's a metaphor. I'm out on the seas, I'm sailing, and leadership says there's a captain, right? There's someone that's got an idea where we're going and is helping the crew become the best crew they can be. But that really that relationship between the captain and the crew is a relationship. So we're on the ship together one way or another. And as Simon Sinek likes to say, you can either lead by power and force, or you can lead by influence and love. And I know which I prefer, both as a leader and as a follower. So we'll get into that here in a minute. Let's go with D. Grant. D, I know you just gave a workshop, I believe, about leadership. So that's fresh on your mind, fresh on your heart. And why don't you channel that energy that you brought right into the room today and tell us a little bit about your perspective on leadership?
Well, what you said at the very beginning, Joe, I think is really important because a lot of times we can tell ourselves that we're not leaders because somebody hasn't given us that role or that responsibility. And we can think that leadership and the ability to lead is something that is bestowed upon us by somebody else. And that's just not true. Uh, my perspective is, like you said, Joe, you are leading yourself every day. You're spending the most amount of time with anybody in the world with yourself, and you are leading you, whether you are aware of it or not. But let's take it even step further than that. If you are a teacher of any kind in any capacity, whether you're in a classroom or not, you're a leader. If you are somebody that works for yourself or you are a small business owner, you are a leader by default. If you're a manager, you're a leader by default. If you work like Joe does in a university, you're a leader by default. If you are a coach or a consultant, you are a leader by default. If you're a parent, you're a leader by default. So there might be a multitude of leadership roles that you're actually facilitating without necessarily having the awareness that you are a leader, because all a leader is somebody who guides people in a direction using influence.
Excellent. That's a great start, man. Way to set that up. I love that. Kristen, give us just an appetizer as to what leadership means to you.
I just have to bounce off of what D. Grant says, because I was thinking that same thing. Even if you don't think you're a leader, right when you said that, Joseph, which we seem to be finishing each other's sentences today, but I was thinking that same thing. I'm like, even if you don't think you're a leader, I never saw myself as a leader. And the most important, excuse me, leadership role that I was ever put into in my life was that of a parent. And so I didn't know that. And it didn't even occur to me until years ago, where I was like, wow, I'm actually a leader. I also was a salon owner at one point, so I was leading, but even still then, I didn't see myself as a leader. But I cannot wait to unpack this topic because there's so much information to talk about with this. And a lot of these things I think that people are going to see that they're already doing, that they may already be doing in their life, and how impactful and wonderful and beautiful it is. So to give themselves credit where they're showing up for that, and maybe learn a thing or two about how you can fine tune it, shine it up a little bit, so that you can be an even more impactful leader.
Beautiful. Yes. What you alluded to, at least in my mind, is what I would call conscious leadership, where you're leading not just by instinct, intuition, or what you've been taught, but you're making conscious choices about your leadership style because you know that's what's best for you and for those that you lead. It's conscious, right? You're aware of that. And I think that's the value of talking about leadership, is it brings to the surface things that really make for powerful and influential leaders, and for those that make soul crushing leaders who suck the energy out of the whole room and the team, etc. And I would say whoever's tuning in, unless you're 18 or younger, you've probably experienced a little bit of both. Leaders who you loved and who inspired you to do more than you ever thought you could, and leaders who kind of made you want to quit every single day and made it very difficult for you to even show up for whatever the role that was. But just so we're clear, before we move on to organizational leaders, just want everybody to understand that regardless of your position, title, or anything, you are a leader because you lead yourself out of bed. You lead yourself into the day, and you can do it, again, by default. You can do it by instinct. You can do it by the patterns that you've received. As D. Grant would say, the story that continues to play inside your head, or consciously, you can rewrite that story and become a better leader even of yourself. My friend John Wyrow, who has done some consulting with me, often talks about the story of his grandfather. I think it was grandfather. His grandfather was very powerful in terms of modeling good leadership. And one of his best things that he taught John was, he asked John, are you willing to sign your name to this? like John would say, "Oh, did I do a good job, Grandpa? Can I move on? Did I get it done?" And his grandpa would say, "Well, are you willing to sign your name to it?" And when John was young, he didn't really even understand what that meant. But now that he's in his 40s and he's got a leadership role and position and influence, he understands that's really, really powerful, right? If he's willing to lead in such a way that he can sign his name to it and go to bed without any regrets or second guessing his leadership style. So I'm going to start with a story because I know how powerful stories are, and that helps people remember. My first full-time boss out of college was the president of the university that I attended. His name was Wayne, and he hired me for an internship. And the internship was 2 years long, where I would spend one semester with each of the different vice presidents, learning the various aspects of administration at a college level. And he kind of crafted that whole internship with me as the guinea pig as something he'd wanted to do for years, but didn't really have either the budget or the person. And it all came together, so I got put into this role for the very first time. Now, of all of the tactics and strategies and all the things that I learned, what I took away most from my time with Wayne for those 2 years was his compassion, his empathy, and his investment in me, not as an employee, but just as a person. And I kind of got set up for disappointment because I thought all leaders were like that, and that was powerful. It was awesome. It was inspiring, right? I couldn't wait to get to work because what am I going to learn from Wayne, right? And then it turns out that after I left that job, I actually haven't found a leader with that much empathy and compassion since. I mean, Wayne would go out of his way to take me out to lunch and to ask me, what did you learn in that meeting? And here's what I was hearing. What were you hearing? Respecting my input as much as giving me his own. It wasn't just a download of the guru to the student. It was a dialogue. And in many ways, it felt almost like a father-son relationship where I could tell he really cared about me, not just what I brought to the institution. And the one thing that stood out the most that I think is really telling for his style of leadership, which I still emulate to this day, is he once told me, and keep in mind in the context, this is a small, private, faith-based institution. And Wayne says to me one day, he says, Joe, if I just give people a paycheck for their time, I'm basically like a pimp, and they're my prostitutes. And that really caught my attention because it was way out of context, small, private, faith-based institution. He says, I can't do that, Joe. I cannot, with good conscience, just trade people's time for money. He said, I want, when people come to work here, whether it's for 1 year or for 10 or for a lifetime, I want to make sure that they have every tool and opportunity to grow in every aspect of their lives so that I've invested in them. And I know that some people will just take that as a stepping stone to something else, and I'll just bless and release. But the whole idea of not using the people that I lead as a pimp or as a prostitute, where I'm just exchanging time for money, has stuck with me ever since. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe leadership that cares more about the person than about the process or the products or the profit. All right. So who wants to jump in there?
Oh, I do.
All right.
Oh,
Go for it.
oh my gosh. My head is like, yeah, so many amazing things. I love that so much. And I wrote down bless and release because that's beautiful. But what I think one of the attributes of a great leader, and like you said, you hadn't really had someone like that since then, because those are effective leaders. And here you are, how many decades later, still talking about this?
Right.
Like, this is how much this person impacted your life. So I think one of the attributes of a great leader is someone who, the word I wrote down was they invest. They actually invest in your becoming. They care, and they treat you like you matter. So it's not just here's the information, go figure it out. If they have the time, because it depends what, corporations and whatever, and overworking and all those type of things. But there's actually an investment in your becoming. And that's what I think is so important. And one of the, like I said, the most important job that I've ever had is parenting. And I've gotten all the payoffs now for the investments that I made, because I knew that these moments were going to come and go, and that I had an opportunity to help mold in a positive way, to help them see things through a different perspective that would help them long-term when I'm no longer in the picture, meaning whether they're just no longer living with me and they're on their own, doing their own things in life, or when it's my turn to transition. I wanted to set them up to be the most capable they could possibly be in their own lives. So I knew that I had to teach them things that would help them. Yet the most important word you said was with empathy. And to me, with empathy comes validation. It's almost one and the same. So if anybody, and still to this day with anybody else that I lead, a client or a friend or whoever else, someone, so if we have more information than someone, we are somehow we just know more than they do in a particular topic, then we are typically become the leader of that person. So like we said, it doesn't have to be this organized situation to be a sergeant of a drill team to be a leader. It can be in all types of situation. But what I first did, and I learned this because my entire leadership / parenting career has been practicing things to figure out what works. And what did not work was dictation or being authoritarian. That may have gotten the task done short term, but it didn't help them to grow in a way. So what I did was, if they came to me with a problem, even if it was something that they should not have done, because I've got 3 kids and they've done things like all kids do, but I would sit down with them, and the first thing was not judgment. It was interest. It was tell me more, and it was being invested in how they were experiencing the situation first. Then there was validation for any parts that my own empathetic heart could understand. So by meeting, I believe when you meet somebody with that criteria, you meet somebody from that level of energy, that creates expansion. And that creates a lot of space to maneuver in. Because if we don't do that, we're constricting and nobody can maneuver in that space. No one's listening, no one's anything. So I created this open environment space where we could expand. Then after they share and they got to a place where I could feel that they were open to a new perception, then I would share something with them where they might go, okay, like how they could do it differently next time. Or I'd ask a lot of questions too, because I also think that a great leader asks a lot of questions. So I'll just leave it at that. I just believe it's really how we approach situations. And the last sentence I'll say is that people remember how we made them feel. That's what people remember of us, just like you remember with your great leader, how this person made you feel. They don't make you feel stupid. They don't make you feel like you are less than them. They meet you with this level of compassion and empathy that's absolutely delicious.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I love that. The E words that come to mind for me, and you guys know I love alliteration, is that a true leader, an effective leader, there's an E word. An effective leader is one who equips and empowers, but does not enable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that goes right to parenting. You talked about that as well, but it's true in leadership. And I'm going to skip to you here in a second, D. Grant, but one thing I wanted to throw in here that was from my own experience is that in some organizations, if I was there long enough, I would find, either for me or for the people around me, we would get promoted, if we're performing well, get promoted, what's called promoted to my level of incompetence, right? So I was good at this one thing, and so people assumed I'd be at the manager of that. And so I move up to the manager role and then find out I wasn't trained to be a manager. I was just really good at graphic design. I was really good at communications. I was really good at website building. And now to be the head of the department, I wasn't trained or equipped with the skills on managing people. I knew what to do. I just didn't know how to manage others to do it at the time. I was very young then. And I see that now a lot, where people get promoted to their level of incompetence and then they flounder and feel like a failure. And so in order to make up for that, then they become the doer. They're still doing what they did before. They're just doing it at a whole nother level, which undermines the idea of leadership and management anyway, and it disempowers the people who are supposed to be doing the job. So there's a gap there, and I think there's an opportunity for those who get promoted to ask for training, whether it's internal or to get external training, or to find someone that can role model that for you, because it's a different skill set when you're leading a team of people than when you're the doer. You're on the front lines. So I just want to throw that in there. And D. Grant, I know you got lots of stuff percolating inside that beautiful head of yours. Please do share.
Well, I'm going to, in a way, piggyback off of what Kristen said. So I think it's interesting that she and I, we're all piggybacking off each other. And I took some really good notes on what she shared. But what you said, Joe, about, your first experience was such a beautiful transformational one, and then you've not had that same sort of dynamic, or you don't feel like you have. One of the big things, and so I gave a leadership workshop today, and the whole premise of the workshop was the key to transformation is the key to recognizing the story that you're telling yourself about who you are, about who other people are, the people that you're leading, the impact that you want to make, how life in the world works. And when you are faced with failure and when you're faced with struggle and difficulty, does that now become your story? Or is that just another lesson teacher in this long line of teaching opportunities that we get to experience? But one of the biggest teaching experiences that I had, and I was reflecting on this actually after the workshop was over, because the energy, just like what Kristen said, we remember people based on how they make us feel much more than what it is that they're actually telling us.
Right.
And the energy that you lead with has a much more expansive impact and is much more memorable than anything that you might communicate with your words. And so when I was, and I had an experience just like what you were talking about, Joe, about people that really good at a particular job, and then upper level management or whatever, the higher departments boost those people up into leadership positions, and they have no people skills, and they really don't know like how they barely know how to really keep themselves together, let alone try to lead other people in it. It's 20 years ago now. I worked for a college, and at the college I ran the radio station. When I was a student, I was running the radio station, and I made it my point to be the doer that knew how to do everything. So much so that my boss, who was the general manager, who worked for the university as a faculty member, just relied on me for everything. So middle of the night, called me, go fix something. He was like way closer to the station. He could actually go up there and do it if he took the time to figure out how to do it, and it wasn't hard. But why figure out how to do that when you can just call me? And so I was doing a bunch of different people's jobs, and all through my student years, I very rarely heard any praise. It was always like, do this, do this, do this, and then this. But the story that was being communicated to me was all the things that I wasn't doing perfect. And it helped to develop this intense perfectionism that honestly I'm still working through. But from my experience in being like managed and led by my former general manager, when I got hired back after I graduated and then put into a managerial position, I reflected back on all of the ways that I hated the experience that I had. And I told myself, okay, if I'm going to be teaching and training the students, I don't want them to have the experience that I did. I want to give them the experience that I wish that I had. And so I made it my point to teach everybody how to do everything so that one person is not responsible for all of the stuff. Second, I made it a point to, and part of it is also words of affirmation and encouragement are my number one love language. I do it without thinking about it. But I made it a point to daily, regularly affirm somebody before I gave them any sort of critique or criticism or told them, what it was that they weren't doing right. Because, and you can call it the sandwich method if you want to, but it doesn't matter. If you are leading with some sort of critical thing, then that's the thing that's sticking with the person. They're not going to necessarily receive anything else that you say. What they're going to receive is, you're dissatisfied with my work and I'm not good enough. And you'll see how they show up and how they do their job. And this is basic human psychology. I didn't study psychology. I just watch people. And I'm just paying attention to my own notes on my own life. So it doesn't matter whether words of affirmation or encouragement are your love language or not, lead with it. Yes. Watch how people respond to you. It does. Everybody responds to it well. So one of the opportunities that we have is we can look back at our past negative leadership experiences and ask, what did I learn from that experience? And if it's something that really sucked, well, then what does the opposite of that look like? If it really sucks, the opposite of that's got to be on the other end of the spectrum, right? And be pretty freaking awesome. So I learned how to be a great leader by doing the opposite of the terrible experiences that I had. I didn't study leadership. I didn't read a whole bunch of books on leadership. I tried to pay attention to some people and just pay attention to what they were doing. But experience is one of the best teachers we can have. And if we were allow ourselves to go, I don't like being talked to this way, and I don't like the worst case scenarios always being put in front of me. Instead, I want to be told, this is the reflection that I had today. This is way before I ever had any idea of what self-concept was, or we create the stories of our lives. This was decades before that. But I realized that my boss used to tell us all the reasons why things wouldn't work. He used to tell us worst case scenario stories all the time, and he called it being realistic. And I realized that it was only realistic to him, and because he was reliving that experience because he kept telling himself that terrible story over and over again. And what could have happened if we had been told a different story? Hey guys, there's a lot of opportunities in front of us. Hey guys, we've got the best team of people here to make a dramatic impact. And if everybody will just, do your best, I believe in you. Things are going to be really awesome. And if you need me for anything, let me know. We didn't get that at all. But I reckon when I transitioned from that job into the next job, which was a completely different industry, I had zero experience in. The guy that I was working for just believed in my ability to be me. And basically, that's what I got paid to do. And so there were some things that they wanted me to do that was in sales that I didn't feel comfortable with. But like Chuck was my favorite leader because every day he was telling me great things about myself. And he had such a just chill, laid back attitude. If there was drama anywhere, he didn't get involved in it. And he didn't force us to do anything. He never picked sides. We had to work everything out amongst ourselves. I mean, it's kind of like great parenting. And so we can look at my crux of this whole thing is we can look at our past experiences, let them be teachers if they were stuff that we didn't like, but also let us reflect on if we're going to think back of a negative experience, a negative story that we don't want to live again, revise that and make the exact polar opposite of that true and treat that like it's Bizarro World and flip Bizarro World into Dream World or Barbie World or whatever the hell you want to call it, and imagine that thing and then step into that kind of dynamic as the leader that you are.
I'm just going to piggyback on that real quick.
Well put, D. Yes, please jump in.
I'm just going to piggyback on that real quick and say that, D, that's exactly how I designed my parenting, was that I said, what did I need? What did I need? And I kept course correcting. Like, okay, I'm doing what they did. Nope. What did I need? So I just wanted to highlight that. In a highlight, big, bold, 186 font.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So back too on this idea of course correction. This is a framework I learned at Pepperdine in my graduate program, which is a business program. And it's very simple, but really powerful. So a lot of people talk about experience is the best teacher, but only if reflection on that experience. I know a lot of people, and you probably do too, who have tons of experience and didn't seem to learn much from it. Why is that? Say, one, they didn't reflect on the experience, and two, they didn't course correct. And so a powerful framework is called keep, stop, start. So with any leadership experience, or even when you're being led, right? Here's how what D. Grant was saying is so powerful. You can learn from great leaders. You can learn what not to do. I learned how not to parent from my stepdad because I never wanted to do anything that he did because it sucked. I hated it, right? So you can learn from that if you don't reflect on it and then make changes. So the key method is reflecting on an experience, either as a leader or as the team member. What should I keep doing? This is working. This is something I want to keep in my toolbox. This is a process or a procedure or words or whatever it is with me, right? Keep doing that. It's working. What should I stop doing? Okay, this was counterproductive. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel that way again. I don't want anybody else to feel that way again. So I'm going to stop doing that. And this might just be a simple 3-column sheet with some bullet points. What should I keep doing? What should I stop doing? And the third one is start. This is the chance for innovation and imagination. This is where you bring something into the equation that wasn't part of the experience, but you're asking yourself, what that is completely different than what just happened that might actually enhance and have made that experience better for me and the people that I lead leading me, right? And I got to tell you, those three questions, if we actually take the time to reflect on the experience, not only, but then we build our own toolbox for what to do next. What should I keep doing? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? And then here's the little PS to that, is that sometimes what worked in this situation isn't going to work in the next. It's a cycle that has to be repeated continuously. It's not like, okay, I learned this lesson and now I'm just going to plow ahead with that particular tool and use it all the time. But then suddenly you realize you're using a hammer to fix a vase. Suddenly it's not working so good anymore, right? Instead of putting in a nail. So it's a guess of experience and reflection and course correction through the keep, stop, and start framework. All right. Who's up? Who's next?
I'll jump in real quick and say that the one thing that I've also learned, by the way, Joe, I love your keep, stop, start. That is, you told that to me like a week ago, and I love that, or whenever that was. I don't keep track of time. But there's something also I wanted to add to this, and that is that what I've noticed with my parenting and even just working with clients or anything else is that when we are in that leadership role / mentor, because sometimes, leaders are mentors and kind of vice versa, that it's paramount that we understand that we are actually in the leadership position because we know more than this person, than the people that are following us. So there's two things that I think are paramount here. And one is that to understand that these people don't yet know what we know. They are not as well versed in it. They have not done it as long as we have. They haven't gotten as good as we have. And I believe a great leader understands that. Because I've seen so many situations where I'm picturing one person in particular in my life that would just do everything themselves because they're like, would not ask the kids to help because like, oh, they just don't do it right. And I said, you have to teach them. And not only do you have to teach them, you have to encourage them as they're learning and they're making the mistakes. So this kind of goes back to what Dee was saying, is that when it comes to my children and raising my kids, it was like, okay, teaching them how to fold laundry, how to tie their shoe, how to clean a bathroom. No one cleans a bathroom like Kristen Brown, right? But I had to go in there with the floorboard still dirty or the whatever it was, and being like, this looks really great. You really did a great time today. Good job. Really. And then maybe later, like as I was just in the bathroom, oh, you know what? I noticed you didn't do the floorboards this time. So the two weren't combined. It didn't take away from the other thing. And this is as often as possible because there's many scenarios. But I believe when we seek to really fill and encourage people, they want to do more. They want to do better. And not only that, they start to feel like they get a little grasp on this. Like this is actually doable. And I'm winning here a little bit. So I believe it's super important that we meet people where they're at. That's huge to me in leadership, is not expecting them to be at the level that you are at, which, by the way, people are at gazillion different levels. Some people learn quickly. Some people learn less quickly. Some people are interested in a topic, so it's easy for them. Some people aren't interested in the topic. I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening there. And the second thing that I wanted to mention is that I believe great leaders are the do as I do, not as I say. So there was nothing that I would ask my children to do or my coaching clients. And I tell them this all the time. I'm like, I'm you. Remember, I'm you. So, and a lot of tools and techniques I'm still practicing to this day. So there's nothing that I would ever invite somebody to do or recommend for them to do if I had not done it myself. To me, that's out of integrity, and people will lose trust with you if you're out of integrity. And part of being a great leader is to build this remarkable trust factor. I mean, the trust that I have between me and my children is ridiculous. My son just said yesterday at lunch, he said, Mom, what we have in this family is rare. My daughter said the other day, she goes, Mom, I'm my mind's blown. I'm crying because we are so family rich. This is what my kids are saying to me. I don't know people that have said these things before, but she said, I just look around my life and none of my people have this. And I was like, yes. And she goes, and I have you to thank. Just so you know, this is because of you. And I had to sit there like really in a spot of, is it? And then I couldn't deny it. I'm like, yes, I've worked hard for this. I worked hard to be an effective leader. Hard, not meaning it was pushing an 800-pound boulder uphill. It wasn't like that. It was just really going within, taking the time to go within and to course correct myself. This is not about, focusing on everybody else's. How can I be more effective? How can I be more loving? How can I lead with love rather than fear? Because here's the thing that I've learned about leading with love rather than fear. When you lead with love, people want to stay. Like you, I would love to have that manager or whoever that guy was, Joseph, for the rest of my life, greatest leader ever. But when we lead with love, people want to stay with us because they know they're supported and they feel good. This does not mean we don't have to have tough love. But when you have that awesome foundation of love, the tough love is not as cutting like Dee Grant's former boss that was just all, negative. But leading with fear, okay, we know some horrible man in history over in Europe that did this. And, many of these people that were not following because they believed in the cause. And this has now come out all these years later where people are saying, I had to do things I would never do. This was like, I had to go out of body to do what I had to do or my family was going to be executed. So what happened when that regime fell, those people freaking dispersed. They're like, they didn't go around crying on that person's grave. They were like, that was awful. That was awful. So when you lead with love, like people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela and all the greats that we know of, and by the way, all the greats that we don't know of. Okay, there could be one in Kansas right now. There's, these people are everywhere. But those people that lead with love, my mother was one of them, people want to stay with.
So good. Just to piggyback on that real quick, as you both know, I did meet Mother Teresa in India. I was on tour with a gospel group, got to spend some time as she shared some wisdom and love with our group. One of the things Mother Teresa has said, and I don't know if she said it that day, but I've read it since, is she says, not everybody can do quote unquote great things. I'll do small things with great love. And I was just thinking about Mother Teresa herself, and not long after Mother Teresa had died as well, very close together in that same year. And here were two people on the extreme opposite ends of economic status, both considered great leaders. So it had nothing to do with their circumstances or their wealth. Really, it was a matter of their heart, right? They both led with love. And Mother Teresa, who had really nothing to her name in poverty, she was a very diminutive Albanian woman who had gnarly feet. I sat right at her feet, and they were had lots of miles on them, and it was clear. But at her death, she was widely considered, and still to this day, considered one of the most influential, not just women, people in the history of our planet. Not through power, not through force, not through command and control, but through acts of love, acts of kindness. And that reminds me too, well, first of all, you said, building. Brendan Burchard, who I follow a lot, often says our two most important things are to generate enthusiasm and to cultivate trust. Out of that, right? That's how leaders lead, through influence, not through power, not through a force. And I love that so much. I think there's kind of this leftover residual echo from wartime, because much of our industrial revolution, much of our industrial age was organized out of the military, was organized because it's a very efficient hierarchy, a lot of top down, a lot of chain of command, all that kind of stuff, and respect, which is very effective in a time of war. You don't want people questioning your leaders when people's lives are hanging on the line in that moment. But unfortunately, that model, which is very effective in military, doesn't turn out to be very effective in an organization. And here's my perspective on that, is that when we treat an organization like a machine, then we treat the people who work there like a machine. But when we realize that an organization is really a bunch of individuals, it's not really an organism. And once it's an organism, we're talking about life. We're talking about cells. We're talking about people, and their livelihood and their well-being. And so I have to understanding that as a leader, it's not about the organization, it's about the organism. about the life that people bring, and you pour your life into them, and they will obviously reciprocate because that's humans. All right, I'm going to defer, pass it over to D. Grant. What's on your mind, brother?
Well, it's interesting. You're delivering all this great stuff, and then you say, "Okay, D. Grant, what's on your mind?" Like, what's on my mind is what you just shared, buddy. Like, that's brilliant. I was reflecting recently about your experience with Mother Teresa because I reference her as a transformational, influential, powerful person often. And one of the things that I learned from reading about Mother Teresa and from her own words, and this is something that's been and continues to be transformational for me, is Mother Teresa said, somebody asked her, like, how are you able to do what it is that you do? How are you able to be around all of these broken people, all of these destitute people, all these poor, sick, people on the edge of, the end of their life? How do you do that and maintain any kind of hope? What is the secret? And I think this, in a way, goes back to what I was sharing a minute ago about, my old boss and his negative stories that he kept. Like, if we were to in the Microsoft Word find and replace, you look for a word, you find it, you replace it with something else.
Did not know that was there, but hey.
Oh, very helpful.
Okay, well, hey, here's this great tool that's inside your Google Docs and Word and everything else. Find and replace, use it. Anyhow, what you can search for a word and then you can replace it with something else. Well, I had this thought, like, what would have happened if I would have done like a metaphysical find and replace of Mother Teresa for my old boss and put him in the place where she was? Like, that would have been a very, very, very different experience for the whole world. But what Mother Teresa said about her ability to be around what many people would be considered to be the worst story in the world every single day, but her not tell herself that story and her not perpetuate that story and let that be her energy. What did she say? She said, I don't see people that are broken. I don't see people that are distraught. I see Jesus, actually not distraught. She didn't say, she said, I don't see people that are broken, and I don't see people that are lost. She said, I see Jesus in all of his distressing disguises.
Yeah.
And when I shared that with other people, it's like this light bulb moment that's like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, Mother Teresa, one of the things that made her so powerful and so captivating was she saw God every day in all of these different people. She saw the God force in them. And part of her leadership was she never treated anybody as less than. She didn't treat anybody as though she was the savior and that she was winning all kinds of heavenly rewards, like our religious teachers will tell us. If you do all these good deeds, you'll win all these heavenly rewards. She basically gave, in a way, a metaphysical middle finger to that and said, no, I see God. God is everywhere. There's no place that he is not. And when you have that kind of perspective and that kind of dynamic in the way that you understand everything, you're going to treat people a whole lot differently. And you're going to communicate in a whole different way. And you're going to look at challenges as not things that are going to destroy you and give a billion reasons why you should be afraid and we should all just hide under the table and pray to God that Armageddon doesn't just, squelch us in the moment. And a lot of us have worked with people or been in family dynamics with people or had relationships with people that operate from that mindset. And what Kristen was saying a minute ago about when you lead with love, people stay because it's safe.
Amen.
What's the one thing all of us want to experience? The one thing, more than money, more than success, more than acclaim, more than winning awards. Every single person on earth, whether they are aware of it or not, even if you're the craziest narcissist in the world, even if you're the craziest sociopath in the world, everybody wants to be loved. So when you provide that for your atmosphere, when you provide that for your people, and by the way, that starts within you. What Joseph said at the very beginning about we have to lead ourselves, yeah. When you are leading yourself with love, you have the capacity to lead other people with love. You can't fake this stuff. It becomes very clear, very, very fast when you're trying to bullshit this kind of thing. And when you're trying to bullshit this kind of thing, you might as well, I don't know, people are going to fly away from you faster than Speedy Gonzalez. But when it's really coming from the heart, and you really are seeing God, you are really seeing love, and you really are seeing the best inside of other people, the magnetism that happens from that can't be copied. And it can't be manufactured. It's a beautiful thing, and that's what real leadership is.
It's a great word.
Can I add to that just briefly?
Great word, D. Grant. Of course.
This is just me, because recently I've been thinking about this because there's so much information out in the world, like so much information. And we even have an AI generating machine that we can just type in questions. We're just going to get all kinds of information. And I want to invite people to, if you're not in some sort of organization where you actually have to follow a particular leader and you're just out there in the world researching your own stuff, I really want to invite people to get into their heart center when they are reading things. Because we have this beautiful thing inside of us called a truth detector, capital T truth detector. And it is going to be light and airy and resonate as true to us. And this is because if we could empower, like one sentence that could empower anybody out there right now is to trust yourself. And to trust yourself the way you are feeling inside yourself when you're reading, watching a video, intaking any type of content out there. Begin to truly trust the truth detector inside of yourself to say, this is something that feels right. Because there's so much content, and it concerns me sometimes because some of the things I'm watching where I'm like, oh my God, who's paying attention to that? Who's that going to hurt?
Right on, sister.
Yep, so good.
I'm writing.
We don't have a ton of time. Go ahead, D.
Just saying, right on, sister. I'm taking
Got a
notes.
little bit of delay here.
Yeah, there's a delay.
For me?
All right. So you said right on, and then you wrote it on. So double whammy right there. What I wanted to throw in here too is, and we won't have time to cover this in depth, but there's a lot of literature that has come out in the last 10 to 20 years about emotional intelligence, EQ, and especially in terms of leadership. So for much of my life, leaders were promoted because of their IQ and the standard IQ test, as opposed to EQ, emotional intelligence. The four, and again, this is just a high level overview, the four main components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness and then self-management. It's the first two. And then awareness of the emotions of others and social management or relation. So it's really, there's two sides of the coin. There's awareness of my own emotional needs and issues and learning how to manage those well. It's emotional mastery. And then being aware of the emotion of the others, those that I lead, and how do I manage that well. So emotional intelligence, EQ, if you haven't heard of it, there's lots of great stuff out there. But I think whether leaders are aware of it or not, those that have a high EQ end up having the trust and the loyalty and the love, all the things we've been, as opposed to high IQ. Now, there are actually some rare leaders that have both high IQ and high EQ, which is maybe that's the coup de grace. But to illustrate this point in an actual story I heard, I believe it was Simon sharing on a stage, and he talked about how he got to interview one of the officers in the Navy SEALs, the elite team of the elite. And he was asking about leadership styles and leadership in the nation, so he could glean principles from that. And the guy he was interviewing, he said, my understanding, my observation now is that in nation there's two types of leaders. There's the one leader who's, because of their understanding of how the organization works. They've been there for a long time. They know the ins and outs. They can tell you everything about everything, and they get promoted because of the information, the IQ. But a lot of people won't talk to them because on the machinery and how it works, right? And then there's another leader in the organization. They don't have the title, they don't have the quote unquote power, they may not have the office, but at the water cooler, the metaphorical water cooler, everybody walks over to them. They want to hear. They'll share their questions and their stories and the things that they're going through. There's just like amazing connection between the staff and this other leader who doesn't really have the title. So, and then the people in the audience were like, yeah, I can put my organization on both sides. And so Simon asked this really telling question. He said, when push comes to shove and there's budget cuts and you have to eliminate people on your staff, do you first cut the person with a high IQ, everything about the organization, but is kind of distanced from the rest of the staff? Or do you cut the person with the high EQ, but doesn't know all that kind of stuff, but is really the glue that holds the whole organization together? And without hesitation, of course, this leader, he says, we cut the high IQ person immediately. And Simon says, okay, I figured that's what you'd say, but why? He says, because you can teach people the information, but it's really tough to teach them about connection, right? That's something that has to be cultivated from within, as you and I talk about all the time.
Love that.
And what I've gleaned from that, that illustration is how important it is. In fact, well, to verify that one step further, I did see a study within the last year about how the qualifications for level executives in their job description when it's being recruited has shifted dramatically from it being information about the organization, which was kind of the standard for the longest time. Now it's more about emotional intelligence and the ability to manage. It's actually the shift happening across organizations as they understand the value of emotional intelligence, which really is empathy and compassion. It's something that both can be modeled and needs to be cultivated. And what I drew out of all of this that I think applies today is I think there's these two essential vitamin C's in all of our lives, whether we're a leader, a follower, or both. The one C is connection. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about love. We're talking about, that the dynamic that's relationships. Leadership is a subset of relationships. We talked about that early on. And the other C is contribution. People want to feel like they matter, like what they're doing has an effect. Like, okay, I'm coming to work and I'm doing all this work, and if I'm not really contributing to the goal, the end, to the greater good, then what's the point of spending a third of my waking life in this organization? And so I think what I would apply is that high EQ is understanding that these two essential C's, connection and contribution, is something that can be cultivated, even prioritized over the performance, the products, and the profits. And the outcomes, the people first, they actually produce better. They feel better about themselves. They feel better about the organization. They've got the connections. They've got the contribution. It all makes sense. And so then profits soar, right? So it's a win-win-win all the way around.
Yes.
Studies.
Yeah, boy.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I'm just agreeing. Yes. This is it. And what's coming to mind is this is across the board because we're talking about human nature. This isn't just, well, you don't know because I work canning canned goods as opposed to parenting. This is like because we're talking humanity. We're talking humanness. We're talking spirits. We're talking souls. We're talking, all that makes us up in these earth suits. And that is the same. There's this core foundation of all of us that is the same, these core desires and needs and wants that we have. And one of those is belonging. And so when we can truly cultivate that belonging too with everybody, that's what people want the most, is to belong and to feel like they matter and they're worthy. And when they do, man, they want to hit it out of the park for whoever it is that they're producing for. Okay. And I'm just going to put this disclaimer in there. That's not always the way with kids, because kids are learning and their brains aren't even fully formed yet. And I'm talking about adults in that scenario, right? Because kids are they're learning and things like that. So it's a little bit different there because we really can't compare a full adult 30-year-old plus brain to a 15-year-old child. There's a difference in the brain chemistry at that point. The brain's not fully formed. But for the most part, as businesses go, it is when you show up in that way that people are really going to want to give you their best. I just think that's amazing. You both contributed such beautiful points today. And as always, I love, love, love my soul siblings, and great talk.
Can I make one little suggestion before we transition into the conclusion part, Joe? Okay, I guess that's 100%. A green light. I just want to drop a name, not somebody that I know, but somebody that I've read about quite a bit. And this is somebody that shifted the dynamics of the way that corporate America operates on a very small scale, but I think it's having a ripple effect because now 10 or 15 years later, his business is doing 800% better than it was before. The guy's name is Dan Price. I don't remember the name of the business that he ran or runs, but he decided to make an executive change. He was having a conversation with one of his lower tiered employees and talking about, how good the company was doing. And the employee that basically was like an admin person was like, I know you think it's going really well up there for you guys because y'all are baking in the big bucks, but those of us down here aren't doing so hot. And he was like, what do you mean aren't doing so hot? Like, you're making pretty good money. And she was like, yeah, like market average, I'm doing okay. But like all of us are barely scraping by. Yes, our business is making millions of dollars, but like most of that money is going to places that like aren't doing the groundwork stuff. And so Dan Price went back to the drawing board and he goes, okay, if this really is a business that's about serving people, I've got to serve my people the best way. So he scrapped and scraped and got a lot of backlash from some of the investor people, but he scrapped all executive level pay and created an even tier paying system where everybody in the company makes the same amount of money. And everybody in his industry was like, dude, that's never going to work. You're going to be bankrupt in a year. Well, he's had between 500 and 800% growth since then. So, and I think this plays exactly into what you're talking, what both of you guys and myself included are talking about in terms of like, when you love people, they feel like they belong. This business, again, I can't remember the name of it, but like their turnover rate is like 3%. Like it's really impossible to get a job there. Nobody wants to leave. And I think that, again, speaks so highly of the value of when you lead with love and people stay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So good. Yep. Put a little capstone on this before we do wrap up. And everybody's pretty familiar with the golden across all cultures throughout time. The golden rule, as most people know, is you treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I would throw out this, what's called the platinum rule, as the new standard. And it's not just treating people the way you want to be treated, which is a great start, but it's treating people the way they want to be treated. And what do I mean by that? In order to treat someone the way they want to be treated, you actually have to know what that is. And I can treat you the way I want to be treated, and it'll come out pretty good, but really that's still assuming that you want to be treated the way I want to be treated. If I really want to be lead with empathy and compassion, then I have to get to know, how do you want to, what's the best, most effective way? Now, that doesn't mean that the inmates run the asylum. That just means understanding that relationship is a give and take. It is the trust that we're talking about. And if I understand that person one way because that's how they learn, but I lead another person a different way because that's how they learn, that takes high levels of emotional intelligence and a willing heart to not just do one way, which is usually the way I want to be treated. So leadership takes the golden rule to the whole nother level, to the platinum rule: treat people the way they want to be treated. And by the way, it's a win-win, because it's going to come back to build loyalty and trust and enthusiasm, things that people want in an organization, which I would like to substitute, find and replace organization with organism, and just see how that works for you. So we've run out of time. This is obviously, leadership is a huge topic, which we could go on for hours. It would be really fun to do. But I actually have to get my daughter to volleyball, and the other one to the dentist. So I've got some leadership to do here right in my own family. Before we sign off, just remind everybody, Kristen first and then Dee Grant, how people get to you and connect with you off this platform.
The best place to
Kristen?
find me is probably on YouTube, which you can type into the search bar at Kristen Brown. But my website there, kristenbrown.org, that has all of my social handles and all the things that I offer. There's even a contact me form. So if you have any questions about things, you can just send me an email.
All right. Dee Grant, how do people get a hold of you off of this platform?
YouTube at D Grant Smith. I post new videos on personal development, spirituality, and awesomeness Monday through Friday. And you can also check out my stories, growthfarming.com.
Right on. So good. And I am at studio, as it says right below my name there. And I started posting weekly videos on YouTube, inspirational, kind of the intersection between faith and life. I like to say life at the speed of faith. And I do have a blog at MoJOE.substack.com, which hopefully those would be words of inspiration and motivation. Just a reminder what Robin Sharma says that I love so much, that ideation or inspiration without implementation is delusion. So it's our hope, our prayer that nothing but you can find small, simple, sustainable steps to apply these principles to your life and just see what happens. By the way, don't give up. Start small or dream big, start small, don't quit, right? And just keep going. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Modern Day Alchemists. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. Until next week, love, light, and blessings to you all.